All right. Hello, everyone. It's always
Hello,
a
greetings.
fun rush, right? The couple of seconds right before the you push the button. So hello, everyone. I am Caleb. This is Wes. Wait, no, Wes, you're over here. This is Wes.
Hi, I
And
haven't seen you guys in a while in these, and I'm excited to be here.
yeah, and this is the monthly COGG Let's Play. So if you aren't familiar with COGG, COGG is the Central Ohio Game Dev Group. We are a community organization designed to build up and support game developers throughout Central Ohio and beyond. We love creating opportunities for all of you to network, connect with one another, learn from one another, and make awesome games. And so part of what we're doing here is this is an opportunity for us to do a deep dive into the systems and mechanics and narrative and level design, all kinds of things going on inside of a particular game. So month over month, we propose a theme, and then people from our community suggest games in line with the theme, and then we vote on it as a community, and the game that we vote on is the one that we play and look at here. So,
Yep.
really fun, really excited. Oh, always a good time. We had a kind of a close one. This was a good one for people to vote on. It was a JRPG is our theme for today, and so of course there are so many JRPGs that are dearly loved by so many, and they often tell incredible stories, epic adventures, heroes and villains, and incredible displays of power and heroism and it's there's a reason why
And,
there's so many beloved.
and amazing 2-hour cutscenes.
Yet amazing to our cutscenes. Now
Yeah.
we won't
Yeah,
run into any of those today.
you guys had a lot of really good suggestions this time around, so we're very excited to kind of like go through a lot. I know we can't like play all of them, obviously, because they can kind of, it does take some time up, but it's really cool to see that, a lot of you have such great interest in there, because I was kind of thinking that, oh, I don't know if everybody likes JRPGs, because they can kind of be a little bit longer in terms of creation, but you kind of think about it, a lot of the foundations in games, especially back then and even today, have kind of built on the foundations of JRPGs. Kind of like anime too, right? It's kind of like how anime and games have
Mm-hmm.
kind of gone into a collaboration in a sense. That it's kind of neat to see those different interested parties get together and see that mix of culture. So yeah,
Definitely.
cool stuff.
Yeah, it
Um,
was really neat.
it, yeah, so cool. I'm excited for this one for
Yes,
sure.
yes. So we will dive in here. I will say, this was not the runner up, and that may be even more sad. But one of the games that was up for a vote is actually one of my favorite JRPGs of all time, which is Skies of Arcadia Legends. So I was
Yeah,
a little sad that it didn't win. I'll admit, I was like, oh,
I remember there's I forget which boss fight, but there's a boss fight in that one that's like, oh, easily like 2 hours long. Um,
oh
and
yeah,
I
oh
just
no, no, yeah.
remember
I think I know which one you're talking about.
it's
Yes.
yeah, some of those are pretty very interesting. And I think the one thing is that is fascinating about JRPGs that we were taking up in consideration in the multiple different submissions is, was there really a unique technique or idea, a game design concept that was just more than traditional of like turn-based battles, right? Because that's kind of the traditional core foundation of a lot of RPGs. And you guys brought up a lot of really good notes on different types of mechanics that would kind of take that concept and kind of turn it a little bit. Whether it was like real time battle systems versus just like normal turn based, but trying to make them feel realistic in a sense, like we are actually going into to head into that, or just really kind of the leveling up system, right? So maybe it's dependent upon like a certain types of currency or what was brought about in terms of skill trees or whatnot. You guys brought up a lot of really good information about these different mechanics, and I think that's kind of what we're really fascinated in. What we'll break down today is a lot of those mechanics that maybe make these games unique, and maybe in particular to this one. It's kind of fascinating to, like, I know there's one of the the bigger arcs has always been like Final Fantasy series, right? So there's a lot of them. But
Of course.
what's interesting enough is those mechanics really do change significantly sometimes between different games.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh.
And so that's what's kind of fun about those is like what has been the approach, because those mechanics kind of influence games that aren't JRPGs,
Hmm.
right? So and that's what's kind of really neat about these JRPGs is they've kind of pushed the level a little bit in terms of, hey, we liked what Final Fantasy did here, right?
Hmm.
Or maybe it's just the style and feel, right? Because these are story-based mechanics. If you talk about the latest Final Fantasy, what was that, 15? I forget what the numbers are.
That
But the one where they're
sounds
riding
maybe
in a
right.
car, yeah. So riding in a car in the desert with a bunch of bros, kind of like influenced a lot of games in terms of their style, look, and feel too, right? Like in terms of, maybe how they travel between different worlds, because a lot of it was traveling in a car.
Mm.
So I feel like some of that could be a homage to, say, Grand Theft Auto, right? Because a lot of that was traveling in cars, in some instances, a RPG, and some qualities. So there's a lot of things that could be picked up. I mean, subtly or intentionally between different genres. So
There was actually
yeah,
a really
so
interesting suggestion from somebody in our community, which I kind of almost wish that I could do. It would be a lot of work to put it together to make it all work. But it would be basically like play just the intro sections of every single Final Fantasy game and just get
yeah,
that first taste of like how the narrative, how the basic mechanics work in the non-combat world, how the combat looks and works, how each of those, and just see how it has changed over all of these years, because they've done so many different things. They've reinvented the system,
yeah,
however many times. And it's been, I think that would be a really fascinating thing. And if somebody hasn't made a YouTube video of it yet, I'm sure somebody should probably make a YouTube video of that, because it's really fascinating to
yeah,
see. Not just like because Final Fantasy is essentially like a story of a technology change too, right? Because you have, all of it spans all of these systems and all of these different technologies, and from the various bit eras to the more recent, three-dimensional eras. There's just so much that has changed. And now we even have the opportunity to see things like Final Fantasy VII, which were
mhm,
built under certain technical limitations, and now were remastered in a totally new set of technical limitations. It's very fascinating, Final Fantasy as a case study of working in this particular, I don't know if genre is the right word, this mechanical set that is JRPG style. Yeah, really, really cool. Well, let's move on. So for today, what you all have chosen, our number one victor is, whoops, where'd it go? Oh, I didn't push that one. All right. Ha! So much for my dramatic
I think
reveal. I can have it up in a moment, though. Forgot to check this one. Somebody play me some waiting music.
I liked your music in the intro, by the way.
Oh
It was
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of nice.
There's a whole contingent of royalty-free music on YouTube. So
Hmm.
gotta put a credit out there for them. I'll add it to the description later as well, the one we used. But it's really really cool, like contingent of royalty-free music out there that you can use. Like coffee
Yeah,
shop background music is another big one that's out
they
there. Here we
they have
go.
quite a few. All right.
Boom. Tales of Symphonia. So Tales of Symphonia was, I think, Tales was how your first entry into the suggestions was Tales of Tales of Tales of Tales of,
That's
because
the ongoing joke, because it's the tales of what? Tales of this, tales of that, tales of which other one? There's so many of them.
so
Yeah.
yeah, another long running JRPG series, which I
Yeah.
will admit I've never played any of them before. This is the first time that I have ever played a
Really?
Tales of. Now I've played Trails of, which at first I like confabulated the two. Um,
Yeah.
but of course, very different having played them. But yes,
Yeah,
so
it definitely has a different, like, I mean, I would almost consider it a either softer or more uh continuous style and look and feel of like you normally would use to like watch anime. Um,
mm,
and that's kind of what if you're really into that kind of like genre, if you're like really into anime, you'll probably like the Tales
Mm,
series, because it's got a lot of like traditional, um, just notes of different character interactions. The look and feel is very anime
right. Yep.
esque.
And they
So if
have
you're really
several
into
like
that,
cutscenes that are basically just anime.
yeah, really, yeah, and that's the interesting thing too, especially with I mean, they started. I mean, you'll see some of the graphics that they have, but they've definitely improved upon them. But as they kind of move forward, I know a lot. There was a really big push into the look and feel of anime-like games, or even just animation of a 3D sense, right? So when they get into 3D, how do we make 3D look 2D? And so there's a lot of things in here that they try to do to make that feel fluid, right? But not all the marks hit there. But it's kind of interesting to see like things that they've tried to do between in-game cut play as cutscenes
Hmm.
versus like actual rendered cutscenes.
Right.
So we'll see some of that today for sure. So
Yeah, and the other thing I'll say about this too, and I was laughing a lot because having never played a Tales of, I mean, there. If you look at the canon of JRPG games, there's just some really strong tropes across
yes,
all of it. I mean, there's some really, really
yeah,
strong tropes. And playing, because I played the first couple of hours of this last night in prep for this, and I was just laughing to myself because this absolutely 100% leans into all of those tropes. And we'll talk more about that as we
yes,
get into it, but it's really great.
yes.
And of course, being a JRPG, typically, what you'd say, a lot of them run between 50 and 100 hours, right? I've heard Tales of Symphonia lands around 80 on a typical
Yeah,
playthrough or so. Clearly, we're only going to be a drop in the bucket of everything that this game has to offer, but hopefully we can get a taste of some of the characters, some of the flair, some of the mechanics as well, as you are all thinking about your games and that. So I will say that there's a lot of this which is professionally voice acted, and my wife and I were looking up a
yeah.
lot of the voice actors. Some really great voice actors show up I think the main character is actually voiced by the guy who did Robin in Teen Titans.
Hmm.
It was
Oh
really
yeah, yeah,
cool.
yeah. And this was this is this going to be played through Steam, or I
Yes, yes.
assume?
And
Okay.
what I'm going to say as a caveat to that, I'm playing it on Steam. The Steam version has some issues, especially some rendering and frame rate issues. There is a
Hmm.
patch out there, so I am playing it with the patch, which does actually two things for me, which is fixes some of the jerkiness of it, and two, also lets me play it in full screen, like fake full screen mode. If you're familiar with that, it's basically, it looks like it's full screen, but it doesn't lock your cursor to the window, which is, by the
Yeah,
way, if you're ever making a game, please consider for your streamers to give it a full screen, like a fake full screen mode, so that it's more easy to jump
yeah,
around to other screens and pull levers and stuff. So as an aside, but
yeah.
yes, that was really helpful. Thank you to the person who
And
made that patch.
I will say, so I've recently played this with a friend of mine, because it has for Steam, it has the multiplayer remote
That's right, that's
playthrough.
right.
So it's a little wonky to set up, but it's totally worth it because I was able to
Mm,
play. How did it work? It was like basically what they would use the AI for. You would then have control over it, just like you would normally when you
makes
control a
sense.
character,
Yeah.
which is really cool. And we'll
That
talk about the
we'll talk
mechanics
more about that
later.
as we get into it. But yeah, that makes a
Yeah,
lot of sense for this game. Absolutely.
yeah.
Very cool.
So that
All
was
right.
a fun feature.
So are we ready? Are we ready to jump into it? Okay.
Yes.
The I'm gonna start the game from like just open it fresh, because the is a really nice, it's not a very long opening intro screen, and I think it's got some good music and gets you a flavor, of course, of what we're going for. So we'll flip over here. Oh, we gotta do some little adjustments with faces, floating heads. There we go. Okay, play. Loading. Hopefully the audio captures of this. Come on, capture it. You can do it. I believe in you.
If you see a cat run across my screen, that is my home, and that's just how it goes. I don't control them. There's one that just kind of entered the room. You might have saw the
There we go.
back door. Cool.
Missed all of the good parts of it, but
That's okay.
now we got some more. Okay, great.
Yeah, and this was made in
2003, I believe, was the original release.
I think that's
Would that put it in GameCube era? Or I guess PlayStation 2 era?
yeah. Actually, I think you're right. I think it was for GameCube.
That
I can do a
sounds
quick
like it'd be
search.
good. I should have looked that up.
I will real quick.
Floating cities.
Yeah.
Always a great JRPG trope.
It's 100% GameCube, and then it was released on August 29th, 2003.
I actually have
Yeah,
my
and then
GameCube sitting right here on my desk next to me.
Oh wow!
Yeah, here.
And it was PlayStation
Here
2,
we go.
PlayStation 3,
GameCube
and then-
right here.
Oh heck yeah! That was
I just got a new
good console.
video capture device. So I
cool.
was testing out to see if I could capture stuff from the GameCube to my computer. So for
Any luck,
future
or-
fun, it did work. It worked. It wasn't as smooth. So the capture card that I have does a pass through. So the HDMI, I'm converting the RCA from the GameCube to HDMI, which then run into the little device, and the pass through to the screen, flawless, beautiful, perfect, smooth. But the USB stream to the computer, little jumpy. It's not quite as what I was hoping for. So I don't know if it was just a bad card or if I need to look at something else. But
By the way, that I miss. I mean, obviously, like if you could skip at some point, I really like those like super artistically aesthetic intros. It was so beautiful to see all that come in and then just like settle here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that.
And this is so artful. I mean, this is all 2D.
Yeah.
But the way that they have layered the parallax and everything, it has this a really nice depth feeling perspective to it. Very, very good. In a way, there's actually, if you're familiar with the game Secret of Mana, there are some we're going back into the beginning here. Go back to the tree. There's some crossover in a couple of ways with the Secret of Mana that I thought was really interesting too.
Yeah.
But let's see. I was just getting a note from YouTube about the quality of our stream. I think it's okay though. I think it's all right. All right, we're gonna go ahead. I'm gonna start a new game, and we'll get into it. Not right now. I've already done that. But there's plenty of settings to change if you so wish. Some of them even have like tactical settings as well.
Once upon a time,
of course, we have to have a
giant
great epic narrative. Yggdrasil.
It's the requirement of RPGs.
It really
period.
is.
And there's going to be a lot of languages and names of things that are going to be not normal for a non-RPG player. But that's kind of the fun of it. Is like a lot of these are kind of like, if you watch foreign films or if you watch anime, that's translated or not translated. Like that's kind of what makes it unique. I mean, it makes you feel like it's a experience of a different world, which I think is kind of the neat draw. But there's a lot of like, I forget what meme it was, but there's like, anime is, a bunch of people getting around with hands on their hips saying, well, I hope we solve this mystery. Like that's RPGs in a nutshell.
Yes.
But
okay, so this is
cool.
a super classic opening. So
Yeah.
here we have Lloyd Irving, which is a great name, is being yelled at because he's asleep standing up. And just look at that outfit. I mean, that is just
Yes.
an RPG hero's outfit. I mean, the hair, the outfit, swords are just always at the hip. I mean,
Yep.
and the swooshy things. I love the swooshy things as well.
It's very anime-esque. Yeah.
Very
Fluid stuff.
anime-esque. And in class, actually.
Do you manage
Yeah.
to sleep standing?
Buzzing around in our house.
1 second.
So a lot of this, like, as terms of cell shading, was one of the first things that you'll notice. With kind of the movement from just a 2D sprite RPG versus like 3D. This is when they started to really get into that. And so you can kind of tell, like, they're trying to do things to make it feel like hand drawn, but they are clearly low poly, people and environments and props, obviously. So that's what kind of makes this really interesting.
Oh, Professor Rain, is class over?
So we'll go through some of this.
Never mind. Let's have someone else answer the question. Genus, how about you?
Yes, Rain. Mythos, the hero, brought about the end of the ancient war in the Holy Ground.
So something I have to bring up here is there was a YouTube channel called COGG Humor. They're no longer around, but they used to have a number of usually somewhat rude and condescending humor. But they had this video that was like a making fun of RPG tropes video, but it was made using like 16-bit characters. And every time I play through something like this, I think of them a little bit. Because there's one of the tropes is like somebody's in town at the very beginning says, I heard a rumor that monsters are coming back. And that conversation almost literally happens in the opening of this game.
Yeah, there was another guy that did. It's called, I think it's the series he does is called Unskippable. So he does like specifically games that have like just traditional tropes and stuff and just really long cutscenes. And he does a bunch of Tales games. And I'll have to remember. He's still around. I think he does some videos, but he's been around for a bit. But yeah, I mean, it's I don't know, it's kind of fun. Like, especially since, they've been around for a while. The tropes are kind of there. I always joke around with anime. It's just a bunch of people in a studio spinning this wheel.
Which one? Which
things.
one? You're gonna have like
slice of life, monsters, and I don't know, goofy mech vehicles, right?
Right,
and there
right,
we go.
right.
It's their anime.
So this is as an aside. This is an interesting point of the story where we learn that there's this girl Colette who already knows that she's this destined chosen one, which I think is also interesting because sometimes you can, going to your spinning wheel idea, sometimes you don't know who the chosen one is, and somewhere at the point they understand, they've come into the knowledge, oh, I'm the chosen one and I'm the hero who's going to save everything. And then sometimes you have this sort of a story, and I know Final Fantasy X does this also, where you have a character, in this case female protagonist, who she already knows that she is destined to be some sort of like great protector or savior or chosen one. Now in Final Fantasy X, there's a great sacrificial cost to that, but
yeah,
I haven't played long enough to know if there's that twist in this game too or not, but
Yes, ma'am.
well, that and what they're doing now is revealing the characteristics of these players, which we're going to find out later. You can use them in your team, but what that does is it almost tells you the types of abilities that they're going to have.
That's interesting too.
Lloyd right here is holding up 2 buckets of water, so he's going to primarily be the guy that's up close and personal using his strength to attack enemies.
Right.
Colette, the chosen one, seems to be a little bit more reserved. She seems more kind-hearted, so she might be more of your healer person that kind of goes in and helps to support the team. So those are things to keep in mind as they're not just doing this just to tell a story, but they're revealing. I like the little cutout person.
Oh my gosh, I saw that yesterday, and I was like, wait a second, why is there a person-shaped hole in the wall? That is an absolutely hilarious detail.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's almost very much like these games, why a lot of certain types of players like these, because it is very story driven. Which if you're into that, it's right up your alley for sure. So that's kind of where, because later you can, I think you can go up to that and learn more about why that's there. I don't know if they go through it into this conversation, but
Professor!
No, Colette. If it is the Oracle, the priests will come here for you. Wait here with everyone else.
yeah, so that's telling them to stay put.
Which,
and
of course,
she's like,
never
"Sure."
happens.
Yeah.
In an RPG, if somebody tells you stay put, of course the protagonists never do. Now, this is what our first time we get control over our character.
Right.
Now, something that I have noticed that's really interesting about this, the first thing that I notice about this is actually the camera and how the camera behaves. There are very few places in the game that give you a free roaming camera, and even then it's a little restrictive. The way that the camera works in a lot of places, like this one, whoa, that's stuck for a second. Okay. Like this one is the camera pans left and right, but then you also still have depth of movement as well. There's a lot of places in town or in the game that'll do that, where the camera will kind of lock to a certain axis that will follow you, and then the rest of it just sort of stays, which I think is refreshing from if you're coming from like 16-bit era old school, with just like that one thing where they're sort of creating perspective via the illusion of the pixels and where everything is, to actually enjoying the three-dimensional environment, but it's not going far enough that they have to be like they can still sort of frame everything to where the player is, how the player is going to be looking at him. So you can have a house and you don't need to put anything behind the house because you're never going to give the player the ability to look behind the house. And so it is sort of a way of being able to frame for the player without having to then accompany the player's freewheeling camera. And you can interact with this, by the way. You can be like, when did this hole get here? I thought it was going to be from him. Like, I thought he was the one who caused the hole.
Yeah. No, it's I think that was supposed to be Colette. Which is supposed to, they really rub it. It's kind of a little bit dated in the plot and description, but they're supposed to make her look super clumsy.
Yes,
which
I
is
have
kind of a
noticed that she's
cultural thing.
very clumsy, yes.
Yeah, it's a cultural thing. It's definitely an anime trope to make certain characters super clumsy.
Mhm.
But, yeah, it's kind of like oh, hey, that's kind of funny, cute kind of thing. But, yeah, it's pretty interesting to just see how hard they play on these. Again, these are things that, it's not unique in a sense like, oh, we've never made a character like this. It's like, these are the types of characters in our pool. And what it does is, people that find that kind of funny and fascinating, you can almost like kind of see where things are going, but then they take that and, especially nowadays, they'll take them and twist them a little bit. Like, this character's normally like this, but let's add this to the character. Because people have a long history of knowing these types of characters, and they'll try to change them a little bit.
Right. Yeah, so right now we're getting the band together.
Yeah.
There is an interesting... So it took me a little bit to kind of unpack some of the lore. Because there's a lot of words and meanings and weirdness and weird, like, pseudo-religious things that... It's always funny when RPGs do weird pseudo-religious things, because usually they have, like... It's like weird pseudo-religious things, but also, like, an angel character does later show up. So they're not just talking about some, like, figurative idea of an angel. There's some... It's an interesting fantasy thing where, like...
Yeah.
There's these mentions of how things work, but in this world, this is actually how things work, and it's really fascinating how they do that. Because I guess finally framing this in my head correctly, it's using words and ideas that are pretty common in Western culture, but then it reimagines them in completely different ways. And this is the other thing I want to point out, is the dwarven vows. These show up all of the time. Yeah. There's like, I don't know how many there are, like 10 or so of these dwarven vows that come up again and again.
Well, and that's Lloyd's family's like background.
Right. Which I was
because his father is a blacksmith, and hence why he has the dual wielding swords and whatnot, but they have various particular types of vows that they kind of attain to. So,
well, the whole thing's really confusing though, because of these three, the short one is Genus. The short one is Genus, but Genus is actually an elf. And Lloyd, his dad is a dwarf. But I think it's kind of like his adopted dad. He's not actually a dwarf. He's a human. And then Colette is also a human. But there are dwarves, elves, and humans in this world, as well as half-elves, which are, at least at this point, we understand them to be the bad guys. It's really... that really took me a while to wrap my head around it, because they know about the dwarven vows, but which one is the dwarf now? And you can't tell who's the elf because the ears are covered. It's a lot,
but it's a lot to unpack, and I think that's why, and inherently, these games tend to have really long cutscenes, because it's cool. Like once you unpack it, it's cool to see all this stuff, but it's a lot to see and to listen to when especially when you're first starting off. I think once you're invested in the story, it starts to compound each other, and you're like, oh wow, that thing in the beginning makes a lot of sense, and now it's kind of neat to the plot change.
That's one of those things.
I mean, it can be.
That's one of those things I always love about the opening cutscenes, is that they usually have really strong implications for what is going to happen later, but you have no context for understanding them at all. So once you've like made it through most of the game and you come back and you're watching that opening cutscene, you're like, oh yeah, and I have this great memory about that moment, and there's that thing, that's a reference to this, and yeah, it's really great. So I wanted to call attention. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just really funny quick side note, because I'm reading through the Wikipedia. The animation, they had an animation series on this, and it was actually produced by Geneon, which doesn't exist anymore, I don't think, right? But anyway, sorry. I was going to call attention
to this mechanic. This is really neat. This is personally one of my favorite things that I have seen in this game so far, and this is called skets. So basically what will happen is, while you're traveling around, there will be moments of opportunity for your characters in your party to effectively have side conversations. They don't have any bearing on the plot, they don't change anything, they don't give you any new bonuses or benefits. They're completely inconsequential, and you can actually even turn them off in the settings. But if you're walking around, and this is actually something that you see a lot in CRPGs, Western RPGs, like Dragon Age, where your characters will have these side conversations that you can kind of just listen in on, and they'll change depending on who you have in your party. But I really like these, so we'll get one right here as we're wandering out and about. Remember if it'll give it to you in this hallway, or if you have to go outside first.
So main plot.
Yes, main plot got in the way. Desians.
Well, and I think that's something to keep in mind, is it's an added layer on top of the core game. And I think that, I mean, when you're making a game and you're like, it is very story based, there's a lot you can put in the game, but let's be real, there's not gonna be a lot of time to put that in the game. You're gonna have to paraphrase a lot of things, mainly because I mean, we're literally skipping through a lot of this. It's just gonna take time, and some players may not be as invested. Not that they're not invested in a story game. I mean, when you go into this, that's what's going to happen. But I think that the spread of attention to players is going to be different for them, for each player. Some might want to read the entire lore word for word.
This is our skit. So like pauses the game. It brings up these dialogue windows. They'll just have this conversation. and they'll have those good like classic anime expressions, the chibi expressions and such, and they'll interact together, and then once it's done, then it will just go away, and it has no consequences at all, except for it's another opportunity for you to experience your characters on a deeper level, just like what you're saying, Wes.
Yeah, I mean, you could almost compare them to, like, I remember in Morrowind and Oblivion, they would have books that you could pick up and read, and it would have a lot of really good lore about the world, but you didn't have to read those in order to play the game. I'm playing Divinity, and it's a very heavy RPG game where you can, again, pick up books. You can read them, but as soon as you pick up the books, you can actually gain skill abilities to do different spells and stuff, but you don't have to read every single page to get that. So what it does is, for people that want to read more on that stuff, they have the ability to do that, and people who don't can skip it. And I think that's important when you're building these types of games, is that you need to be building layers of story information. Otherwise, if they're required to read everything, or if they're required to go through all this, there's just some people that are going to be, I feel like, turned away to that. So by adding in the levels, it allows for a greater audience that can go through this content at their pace that they want to.
So a couple of things now that we have a larger area to wander around in. So you'll re-notice the camera. So as I'm looping around in here, the way the camera is locked at this one forward position. You'll see it got a slight turn as you came around that corner, but not much. And then it follows pretty much right on the same. It's like there's a pull from the main character to the camera, and that never comes closer or farther away from the character. Maybe just a little bit right there a couple times. But that's good to know about how the camera is understanding the world. And again, there's nothing behind that house because the player can never see behind that house, and so there could even potentially be no textures behind the house. Maybe there are, but like there's no way to know, and it doesn't really matter because it's not an option given to the player.
Fairly Animal Crossing-esque, like almost. There's some turning left and right, but yeah.
This is also a game that doesn't really have a lot of like nuance to the interaction on this layer of the game. So it's pretty much, you can walk around. You do get some actions later on, but for the most part, you are like, there's a wall here, there's a wall here. You can climb up things that have obvious inclines, like this ramp, but otherwise, like even the smallest hill pretty much locks you out. So
Can you jump? I can't remember.
You can later. I don't know if we'll get that far.
Yeah.
But yeah, you do get the ability to jump, but only at specific places.
Right.
So it's like an interaction point that says you can jump up this. So you can't just arbitrarily jump anywhere.
Obstacles in a 3D world. Yeah.
Yep. All right, well, we'll move forward here. All right, we're going to get introduced to our first time going into combat. If you are used to old school RPG combat like Chrono Trigger, what is that called? Active time.
Turn-based? Oh,
it's active time. Yes. Yeah. If you're used to active time, this is quite a bit different. This is on the scale of things moving much more towards like a fighting style game. You'll see what I mean when we get in here, but.
And that's this alone is what really attracted me to this play style. It made for a much more smoother transition between different attacks and opportunities.
This is so fascinating. Okay, so we have a character. All right, we're gonna pause. So if you'll notice, we are on this field here. This is actually a three-dimensional field. The camera again locks you to sort of a two-dimensional perspective, but there is three-dimensional movement within here. You have your character and the other characters in your party are all visible. And the way that they have this set up, and this is one of those reasons why it reminds me of The Secret of Mana a little bit, is you only have control of a single character. The other characters are being controlled by an AI. And you do get a little bit of customization with your AI. You can kind of decide what abilities they can and cannot use, but by and large they are entirely controlled by the AI. You don't have control over them, so you just have your primary character that you're using, and you're going to use their abilities and Yeah, it's really fascinating. This pause menu doesn't actually give you like for tech. Let's go and look at tech. So what tech is doing here is you're not actually choosing to use the tech from this menu. What's happening here is you are assigning the tech to a button, and then you can use that button combination within combat to use the tech.
Yes. And then you will get, it's kind of like if you played Pokemon where you have 4 skills, except you don't forget them necessarily, but you have 4 different abilities to use, and then you just decide which one you want to use when you're good to go.
Sure. Yep.
Then this is assigning the button commands for that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I had to figure that out because I remember playing as 2-player. I was like, why can't I use this other one? Now, you can play as a different character. You could switch up your primary. So if you didn't want to play Lloyd right now, which is what you're playing, right? You could play as Colette. And
I don't know if you can do it during battle. Can you do it during battle?
No.
Yeah.
I don't think
so.
Actually, it's a good question.
I don't think so. I think you have to do that from the main menu back in the other part.
But before you enter a battle.
Before you enter a battle, right. But yeah, so what we have right now is, we'll go back into it. But so basically we have blocking. So if we look at Lloyd, I can push the X button and that'll block. And so if I get hit, that will reduce the damage that I receive. I have the standard attack, which is like this. So this is just, I can just mash A and he'll just use the standard attack repeatedly. And I didn't get to show the text yet.
And then you have your cooking.
Oh yeah, we'll get into cooking in a little bit.
Yeah, cooking. Cooking is actually a surprisingly big thing in this game.
It is a surprisingly big thing. I was not expecting that.
Yeah, it's fun. I think it's kind of neat. It's just another added layer. I mean, you see a lot of that in games now that even are RPGs. If you talk about, what is it called? Harvest Moon does a lot of cooking things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Kingdom
Zelda,
Hearts. Kingdom Hearts does lots of cooking. All right.
This kind of makes sense if you're collecting a bunch of things in the world and you have items to use. You can use it for health and power-ups and whatnot. So, kind of goes hand in hand in the mechanics.
Okay, so this time I'm gonna try using the tech. So I only have the one. So right now I'm targeted the ghost. So you actually can target different opponents, and that is using. Here we go. If I hold in RB, right bumper, I can change which target I want. If I just tap RB real quick, it'll change it to whichever one is closest to me. But basically what they were saying at the beginning of the battle was that there's a rock, paper, scissors here. There's different things are weak and strong versus other things. So the ghost is going to be better hit with things like magic or, some sort of like tech or something, whereas the zombie is going to be much better to hit with physical attacks. And so they were saying, hey, make sure that you use your character Lloyd versus the zombie first to be the most effective against that. Now the other thing I'll note actually while we're paused here is that if I have this currently it's what's called semi-auto. And basically what that does is if I start to use an attack, then it will move my character into the correct position to use that move against the enemy. So if I just push A, it will actually run all the way across the field on its own. I didn't do that. If I force myself to run away and hit A again, it will run all the way back to try and hit that. Now you can go into full manual mode where you control all of the movement by yourself. Or I think you can actually set to auto and then just sit back and watch things happen. Don't recommend it.
Well, and the thing is, we have to think about what came before this because it really was pretty much all auto. You didn't control where your movements were on the playing field. Although, depending on where they were, you would have certain advantages or disadvantages. If you're further back, closer up. So this is kind of trying to merge that in a more organic way. Getting you a best of both worlds in some instance. And again, this is kind of new for the time, and I think that's what makes this so interesting. So kind of think of it that in that realm, it was kind of fun to see these new mechanics, because before then it was like maybe 3 sprites on one side, 3 sprites on another. That's the enemy, and you would just go down the line and choose whatever attacks they were. And it
And
was
they had these
neat
epic
for the
jumps
time.
where they would like leap across the
Right.
screen and like attack, or have these cool like pushing, pushing.
Yeah. Which they will do. Like once you get certain
Yes,
attacks and certain
sure.
techs, they have power moves that are really cool. But in the meantime, like you can literally, if you just wanted Lloyd to run in the background the whole time, you could do that. Him not doing anything. You control him.
And also, this was something I have as well, is that the normal attack also has variations on it too. So if you're pushing
Right.
forward or up or down on the control stick with the standard attack, that will also do special things. So for instance, if I push up with the standard attack, he'll do this kind of like leaping thing. And that can be really helpful for trying to attack air-based enemies. Because where you connect with the enemy is actually important. You can miss if you're like underneath of them.
Right. Exactly.
Didn't even get to use the tech yet.
I know.
I'm better
Some of
at this
these,
now than I was
first
the first time.
Well, that and the first level bosses are enemies are very
Absolutely,
easy,
absolutely, yes.
as they should be. I love how it's called Gald. My favorite carryover is, what is the name of the currency? Is
Mm-hmm.
it Gil? Is it Gald? Coin?
Zenny.
Yeah, whatever it is. Zenny, yeah.
Okay, we're gonna go to the temple. Let's save real quick. 'Cause there's not another save point for a long time after this.
Really, yeah.
Yeah. Actually,
I mean, it's
I'm gonna do one thing real quick. I'm gonna go to the shop, ye old shop. I'm gonna buy myself some more apple gel,
which is health, right?
which is
yeah, it's
heals 30% health.
Yeah.
Which is nice because it scales. So some games will do potions that always heal 50 no matter what, or set amounts. This will always heal 30%, which I like that a lot because then that scales with your character.
I mean, fascinating enough is this portion of the game that, obviously you're buying currency and whatever. This is probably what is both the most standard part of RPGs, but also kind of the most tweaked portion, I feel like it's sometimes. Because, like, I've played some Final Fantasy games that they kind of changed, like what you were saying, they changed it from a very static number of healing points to a percentage healing point.
Mhm.
And each generation, I feel like they kind of tweak this and say, okay, maybe the players like it this way a little bit more.
Right, right.
So it is what it is. I mean, it's UI, it's, currency inventory. So it's as neat as it can get. But, I just thought it was a neat thing to point out, is that this is probably one of the most kind of staples, but also the most tinkered around with mechanics.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how they we're talking about the food system. So you can buy ingredients and then you can use those to cook. They talk about this a little bit later on as well. But you can, like, everybody likes different kinds of sandwiches. And so you buy different kinds of ingredients to make sandwiches for different people. And the more of the specific ingredient for that person, the more it will heal your character when you make the sandwich. It's an interesting little mechanic.
Yeah, that, and depending on who makes it, can make a better or less quality food.
And also
the
there's
cooking
like
gets better.
There's like a hunger bar, right? Because I think if we look at cooking,
The status.
yeah. So like Lloyd has 5 stars, and 2 of them are blue, which means you can eat. I think up to two things. Maybe different foods have different fill.
Right.
But you can't eat if your stars are full because you're full, and so you can't eat anymore.
Yeah.
So it does have like a limit on it too. Yeah. Anyway, it's fascinating. I haven't got far enough into the game to really see the food shine.
Yeah,
but I am curious.
Lloyd, if I remember right, isn't really good at cooking, but it's who's the little elf kid again? The
Genus, yeah.
Genus, yeah, he's really good at cooking. So he's the one at the party that later he's going to start to make really high-end gourmet food that the whole team will benefit from. Especially because you may not be going to another town for a while, so you might have to just be using what you pick up for health or for power-ups or whatever. So it does kind of play a significant role as you go through. If you, say, forgot to buy a bunch of stuff at another town. Later it kind of becomes better.
So we're about to be we're on the plains now, and as you can see, we actually have a little bit of camera control. Not much. It's only lateral. You can move left or right. But this is on our
This
map
may
level.
definitely be. This may be jarring for some people because he's like, "Why is he bigger than a tree?"
Yes,
this is what they
because
call
scale
the
doesn't
overworld.
matter. Yeah.
This is what they call the overworld, right?
Yeah. What I love about this, and you can actually see it up there in the corner a little bit, they basically lifted the overworld map enemy encounter straight out of Zelda 2. Other games have done this. I don't know if they were looking specifically at Zelda 2 when they copied this, but Zelda 2 is the earliest that I know of that did something like this. There may be others, but basically the enemies exist on the world map. They're not take 2 steps random battle encounter, which, by the way, I just want to say for the record, random battle encounters are my least favorite mechanic in any game ever. I absolutely hate random battle encounters. Just above that is like slides, puzzles where you have to like slide down a thing and jump over canyons and grab onto things. That's just above it. But number one, most hated mechanic is random battle encounters, because I'm an explorer, so I like to see all of the corners of everything. So this solves that for me completely by having the enemies actually on the map, and you can see them, you can run around, you can run into them, and when you run into them, that causes the battle to happen. If you are able to dodge them, you don't have the battle, and I love that so much.
Well, and that's the thing is, like, I think there was this fear of... Are you good? Yep. I think designers were always afraid that if players didn't battle enough, they wouldn't be leveled up enough to go beyond different elements.
Absolutely.
But here's the thing. If they're not strong enough to get to a next portion, because there's definitely parts in this map alone that you can go to, and, well, I think some of it's locked down, but there are portions in the game where you can go to, but you're not strong enough. You're just not going to get past that. But what this does is it give you that choice. And that's what's nice, is it feels more fluid, it feels more free. You could skip all these enemies if you want to.
Right.
But you may not get the experience you need to get to the next portions of the levels to level up.
Yeah, and I think you actually hit it on the head too, is that the reason why I prefer this immensely over random battle encounters is the illusion of choice. I get to choose whether or not I engage in that. Now, most of them I'm probably going to have to engage with. In fact, there's lots of them that'll either run at you really fast or completely block your way and you have to go through them. But by and large, it still feels like, because I'm the one who moves the controller stick to make my character run into them, that was my choice. And so I own going into battle. Whereas random battle encounters is, I don't get to make the choice. And so, it's just about that intrinsic feeling of choice there. I think it's really cool. The other point I would say is that to the point of not, wanting the characters to have leveled up enough, I will also point out in that instance that the designers have 100% control over the leveling curves. So they get to make the decision for how many battles it takes to get to the next level. So that is entirely in their control, how grindy they want to make something. Let's do a battle.
Let's get started.
Oop, locked. Oh, let's get a tech out here. Let's see. Let's go for the wolf. Here we go. So this one's a little bit of a ranged attack, which is nice. There we go. Teamwork.
Yeah, so in 2-player, you would play as what is now represented as just the AI artificial intelligence.
Yeah,
It was kind of fun.
That's really neat. That's really cool.
It's a little funky getting it to work at first because you're literally like removing the AI mechanic and replacing it with what normally would be if you decided to switch some primary player to a different player. But it does definitely work. I think it took my friend and I a little bit to get going, but it was fun. It was a lot of fun because I was like, man, because like, yeah, I think it's kind of fun to do these like almost what feels like couch co-op games.
Yeah.
Playing with other people, especially when you're in the story, revealing these things with somebody else. It was kind of neat.
Absolutely. My wife and I have been thinking about doing our own Let's Play stuff together, just to like
I mean, this would be a fun one to do.
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. I mean, we have these kind of conversations all the time, and we're currently playing through Jedi Fallen Order, and we're both big Star Wars fans, and so getting to play through that together and talking about it and be like, oh, this thing and this reference or this thing, and it's just really fun to play together. Yeah. I like it. I mean, that one is very much like only one person can play it, but I do like games that give you the opportunity to engage with somebody else together in the story. And I think that's such a cool twist on this kind of game, because you never expect like a JRPG to really be multiplayer most of the time.
Right, yeah.
There was Crystal Chronicles was one that was specifically designed to be multiplayer. That was another GameCube era game, I believe. That was a really good one.
I love the old man.
Yes.
Oh, I've been attacked. Where? Oh, I don't know, but it's definitely life-threatening.
He made it all the way down the stairs.
I think he fell down the stairs, is what I imagine.
Okay, fair. Ugh.
He wasn't attacked by any monster. He was just old. Sounded like a scapegoat.
And then the body is magically gone.
And he's gone. He
Now,
disintegrated into the Great Rock.
You get these interesting choices sometimes. They're just like they're a binary choice between one or two options, and we're gonna get one here in a second. This one here, and it's I'm going to or I'll wait for you, and the obvious choice is I'm going to go also. But man, there's a part of me that's super curious what'll happen if you say I'll wait for you, because I know what happens next. Huh?
Which did you do when you played this the first time?
I'm going to. Yeah.
Well, why didn't you choose the other one?
I don't know. Okay. I'm curious because I cannot imagine a way that this will pan out if I don't also go with.
Well, yeah. I mean, then you could explain what happens if you go. Colette says she'll be fine. I can't believe you, Lloyd. Well,
and that's it.
Fine.
It's exactly the same result.
There's
no choice. There's no choice here at all. Of course, there couldn't have been a choice, but.
Well, and I think that's what I was reading through the.
That is so funny.
Wikipedia. But yeah, I think that's what you were talking about, which really is what this game was trying to do, is the illusion of choice.
Right. Which many games do, and that's fine, honestly, in many ways. Like this story is huge and massive, and there's so much text and so much dialogue. There's not really like you don't need to burden yourself with having to have a branching storyline. I mean, there are games that are designed to be really great in-depth branching storylines. Not every game has to be. It's okay to be linear. It's an interesting conversation to be like, well, how does the choice system in this game, then what does that actually accomplish? Like, what does that give you? I suppose to a certain degree it helps you identify more with your main character? Question mark? I'm not sure.
Yeah, and kind of going into the original writer Takumi Miyajimi, I forget it, I can't pronounce. I'm just gonna butcher that name. But anyways, the writer said that they explained the Tales of Symphonia as a plan to create a unique Symphonia, dependent on the player's choices and affection system. So yeah, he's definitely writing this in the intent to give the player the choice to decide the type of like experience that they want. Obviously, like you have to be careful with that as a game developer because it can easily multiply the amount of work to create the game experience, right? It could also be beneficial if you do start to go down those paths, which a lot of games now do because they have thousands of developers to be able to create all these content, and it becomes replayability value.
Right.
But yeah, depending if you don't have the resources to do that, then you do something like this, where you give the illusion of choice, the ability to say, what if they chose this path, but really kind of narrow it down to a very specific type of plot.
So I have a question for you, Wes. Maybe you will know the answer to this, having played this game through before. Do you know what the T and the S scale is on the character card? Because you got level beneath that, and you got next, which is the experience to get to the next level. Do you know what the T and the S is?
I think it's slanting more towards, you said the tech or the special? I don't remember, to be honest.
Yeah, because I haven't had that explained to me in the game yet as far as I had gotten. So I'm kind of curious about that.
Okay, I will find out for you.
Because I wonder if there is an attitude system underneath, depending on how you answer things. If you're actually like influencing people's overall attitudes to you, and that can have some sort of impact on the larger game. Maybe not.
So it's
Maybe
aligned with strike type or technical type.
Okay.
So
Aside, the guy who voices this guy has apparently his credit list on IMDb is over 400 items long. He's a very prolific voice actor. He actually played a character in, if you're familiar with a show called Babylon 5, which is one of my favorite sci-fi shows. He voices a character in the 5th season called Byron, who's a telepath. And I hear his voice on occasion, again, because he's been in voice acted in many things, including many games. And I hear it, I'm like, wait a second, is that him? That's him, isn't it? Yeah. And so then we go look it up and yep, that is him again.
And I will say we actually switched from the normal American voice actors to the Japanese, and they're just as good. We were just trying it just to see what it sounds like.
Absolutely.
And so that was kind of the amazing thing here too, is they put a lot of work in the voice acting. Which is not always there in RPG. Sometimes so a lot of times nowadays they understand that you kind of need that to be competitive, but back then it sometimes was just text. So it was kind of neat to see that. I mean, obviously I think there's portions of it that is just text, but cutscene wise they try to put as much in there as they can. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so kind of going back to the TNS. So depending on those types of skills that you get, you can make each character learn skills that either fall under the S type or the T type, which is S is for, what do they call it?
Get in our way.
They don't really say what. Oh yeah, strike or tech. So depending on your character's natural abilities, some characters that you will start to learn as you work with them will realize that an S type is much better for this character than another character. So Lloyd is actually pretty good at T type attacks. I think that's how it goes. Yeah, versus Colette, which is really good at S types. So I think that really is dependent on how close you are to a character, if you need to do further away attacks versus close up and personal attacks, so to speak. We actually just got another character that jumped into the play.
Yes.
As you can see by the stats at the bottom, their skills are way better. So again, another illusion of, oh my gosh, like we could have died. But what happens is in the second round, he comes into play to help even the playing field a bit more.
Oof,
I mean, if you do play this, like, you're definitely getting your butt handed to you, so to speak. And there is a thing, so you're starting to realize that blue bar at the bottom, the TP.
Yes, yes.
You do gain that as you start to attack. It's kind of like your magic spell power or whatever. It's your power that lets you do certain attacks. Right. So those those technical abilities need time to fill up that bar in order to use them. And some of them have different amounts that you need. So that's kind of what's happening is we're waiting for that to move up either by attacking or just waiting over time between levels. Yeah, nice.
Just as I expected.
I did not
Just
make it
as
through.
expected.
I didn't make it through the very first part, like before, like the two guys. The very first time I
really?
did that, and of course,
Yeah.
the last time I saved was back at the village, and so I had to go through the whole thing. The reason that it happened the first time is because I had spent a lot of time fighting enemies on the overworld map,
Yeah.
and that kind of did me in.
And then you didn't have as much health. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that can definitely happen. It's definitely a careful balance in the beginning of a game. Once you get the idea of how the mechanics work, it's pretty straightforward for the most part. Until they throw another curveball at you, like, hey, this character poisons you or something, right? Like a new mechanic that you're maybe not as familiar what to do with.
Is that an X-sphere?
If you think I would say is Colette looks like she's just staring off in the distance, like, I've got a lot of responsibility, I just realized, as the chosen one.
That's right. I have to go accept the Oracle. Grandmother, I'm going to undergo the trial now.
Now, I gotta say, this trial thing is really just an excuse for you to have to fight a bunch of monsters.
Yeah.
Yes, that is correct.
It's like, we're going to have to go into this chapel, and there's a kind of a maze of things, and you have to fight a bunch of stuff, and then... Yeah, it's sort of like, why is this place full of monsters? They ask, and they're like, oh, because that's part of the trial. All right, tracks. JRPG logic is great sometimes.
Yes.
We need them to fight a bunch of monsters. Yeah, it's full of monsters. Yeah, let's go for that.
You to ask for my name.
This is our brooding mercenary character.
Yeah, he's like, you're not strong enough, you shouldn't go.
Non-subtly named Kratos.
Circumstances.
Yeah.
I have little choice.
It's a deal then.
And then he's just asking for
I'm
money.
going too.
Yeah.
Like, I'll do it for money.
Lloyd, you'll only get in the way. Be a good boy and wait here.
Yeah. You only get in the way. You probably said, what did you say?
That's of course the answer that I applied last time. I'm gonna just totally go the other route this time.
Gotcha. Then I must be going to follow you on my own way.
Wait.
So-
That's exactly the same answer. Not exactly. That's basically the same
Yeah.
answer.
Do as you wish.
Yeah, it is. What the?
Let's go, Genus.
Lloyd, I figured you were going to say that.
I figured you were going to say that. Of
This
course.
isn't a field trip, you know.
Okay, so we're fighting anyways. Yeah, it's kind of funny. I mean, it's like, oh, why did they do it this way? But really, it's like, I mean, if you start seeing those games, like you talk about, like, if you've ever played Fable, that was really about opportunities of choice and literally changing the way the character feels, looks, acts, opportunities in games. Those are a nightmare to make. In some instances, they're fun.
Well,
because you're literally building all these different story arcs.
Yeah, it's really helpful to have people who have done it before.
Yes.
Not that someone can't
Yes.
do it from scratch, but it is helpful to have somebody who's like had to deal with the complexities of a branching narrative.
Right. Exactly.
All right. Yeah, so we have Kratos in our party now. We can... Well, there's a bad guy right there.
Another floating skull, which represents.
All right, let's trigger this. It's sealed. This is where we need to go. We need to find the Sorcerer's Ring, because of course, there's a thing we gotta go find. Actually, the thing that Kratos handed to us was actually kind of interesting. It's effectively your tutorial. It's in your items. You can go to the training manual, and it has a bunch of explanations for how to do combat better.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like before then you didn't have access to any of those. It's not that they couldn't do that, but like I mentioned before, especially with story and the mechanics, there's a lot going on here. So as a designer, you need to kind of reveal these things a little bit at a time. Otherwise, the player's just going to be like, what the heck's going on? There's so much stuff to look at. So it's kind of a good way to almost artificially let the new character come in and say, hey, here's another unlocked part of your UI system that you can read more stuff on. Great, that's fine because I've had a chance to look at everything else. Because otherwise it could just be quite a lot to consume.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always kind of fun to have these stronger characters play in the beginning because they kind of show you, hey, my characters might be able to get to this point at some point, right? So
another game that did
classic.
Another game that had a variation on that approach was Chrono Cross. It's a sequel to Chrono Trigger. And the opening of Chrono Cross is you start with these characters that are very powerful. They're late game characters, and you're kind of in a late game area. And then what they do is they do that, and then they reach a certain point, and then you travel all the way back to the beginning, and then your characters are right at the very beginning. But it gives you that immediate sense of like, this is what it feels like to be powerful. I feel like that
gives
could...
you a point.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I think it could bite you a little bit, because then it could be like you make the player feel that power fantasy and then you strip it away from them. So you'd have to carefully balance the beginning so they didn't feel too like weak and insignificant. But it is a good feeling to sort of drop the characters in and like, here you go, player. This is a late game character and you can just destroy everything in your path.
They did that in another game I remember, where you were like 4 different players that were like almost godlike like abilities to fight this very crazy boss, and you find out that, wow, that's a different story arc. So what happens is you go through that, and then they kind of use that as kind of like, this is the kind of point in the game that you're going to get to. So when you start off in like a very low level, after that, you realize how much farther you're trying to get to. That kind of makes sense. And you know, that, like you said, it could bite you in the butt, kind of be like, oh man, that was really cool. But then you kind of get a parameter of like how far you want to get to, at least. So you know how powerful things can get. And I think that's kind of fun, because like sometimes it can be kind of slow at times when you're leveling up at the beginning. And you might be like, you know, I want to know what it feels like to get this and that. And then, you know, level grinding is real, and sometimes you just have to get through them so you can level up, so you can get in there. And I mean, the building of it can be fun too, when you get to a point where you're like, wow, I did all this to get my characters to this point and their abilities. But for some, that might be like, wow, okay, that took a long time to get to. But if you kind of get them a taste of what they're aiming towards, it's kind of a neat feeling, to be like, cool, I'm getting to this point where I can use meteors to destroy enemies. I just gotta get there.
I just love it.
So...
I mean, there's the like last final ability in Skies of Arcadia is like, you throw a moon down onto your enemy, and you're like, okay, this is over the top, and I'm here for it. So this was actually. Oh, go ahead.
No,
I was going to say, this battle that we're in right now, this is actually a forced battle. We came into the room, dropped us into a cutscene, and then forced us into this battle. We saw this happen earlier with the battle at the top of the steps, but this is really cool because they're actually forcing you to encounter this enemy here, because they're going to show you something to basically introduce how they're handling their level design, which I think is really neat. We'll get into it once we defeat this guy, but ouch.
I just love how...
Ooh, I'm about to die. Ooh, I got close there.
Yeah, he's not doing great. I just like how Gene's like basically fighting with what looks kind of just like a toy. Pushing his I'm just a kid trope.
Yes.
He's actually one of my favorite.
There's the
Colette.
There's the tripping.
Yeah, I'm clumsy. Yeah, it's real thick. In this
It is
series.
real thick. It's real thick.
But actually, I really like Gene because he becomes later like really helpful in a lot of different way. Because one of the things I remember is that because of his abilities, and each one of these characters have natural abilities for certain types of mechanics, and they really start to shine as you go. He gets to be so fast sometimes. He just literally like can teleport anywhere to across to any other enemy, because it's AI, right? So they kind of move forward and back. But there's certain things about him because he's just so small that literally he goes from 5 different enemies before you can get to the one. Almost, it's like insane. So like you'll see that as you start to move forward, that certain characters like just really do well in certain mechanics. It's kind of fun to see.
Yeah, so what happened with that block is there's actually a series of slots down at the bottom, and you can get the blocks to form, and then you drop them through the holes to position them so that you can get to different areas. This is a little secret cache rewarding our players' exploration and curiosity. Wow. But yes, in order to get everything, so there's a thing to the right, which requires a block there and a block through there. And then there's a thing to the left, which requires 2 blocks as well. Those are just chests with additional items in them. So we can kind of skip that for now. Ooh, save spot. Forgot this was here.
Oh, yeah.
But what we really need to do is we need to get across this gap, because this is where the Sorcerer's Ring is. So we'll go ahead and just skip all of the side questy stuff.
This is a dangerous situation. Don't overdo it.
Well, and that's the fun thing too, is that talking about real turn-based battle systems where you're walking around, the enemies do the same, right? So he's creating an area of effect.
Yeah.
Swinging his arms around. So that's like what opens up those opportunities too.
Got combo newbie. Okay. I think we can go up here. Come on. So that gets that one, and we need a second one. Come over here. I don't want to chase. I don't want to move the block around that much. Here we go. Ouch.
And that was the other thing too. I think I didn't really see it here, but is there an opportunity of attack? Depending if you
there isn't.
sneak
No.
up on.
Yeah, because
So that might be harder.
I've seen that in other games before, which is I really like that. So yeah, well, it's how to describe it. So depending on whether or not if you hit them from the behind, or they hit you from the behind, then you might get an extra attack or opportunity when you go into the combat. But as far as I can tell, I've not seen that be a thing in this game.
I can't remember if they have that later or not. I always like when you can pull. Where are you pulling from?
I was being able. I could pull actually.
Yeah, I just thought it was funny, like you pulling from a brick.
Oh yeah, because what was he grabbing onto? That's what you're saying. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Now it says you can use the Sorcerer's Ring by pressing X, which gives you this little thing.
Yes.
But that
Which is
has this huge extra use. It's this
yeah.
It's this random artifact that's supposed to be for this temple or whatever. It has this very significant additional bonus use. Let's see if I can find an enemy here. Here we go. It freezes the
Stun
enemy.
them. Yeah.
So that you can...
Yeah, and it does a lot of... I think it does a couple other things, right? So it, like...
Oh,
it's kind of like the... I mean, there it kind of stuns them.
Right.
And freezes them. But
So that you
I
can
think
get
it
around
also
them.
opens doors and stuff
Right.
as well.
Well, that didn't work. Oh well.
Yeah.
Don't overdo it.
And a lot of this is like a really good skill to have with these kind of games is an understanding of game balancing, because there's a point where you can literally calculate what would be a fair. I took a class with a guy that used to work or go to our COGG meetings in game balancing, and what I found out that I thought was the most interesting thing about game balancing with how many enemies should you have in a game? How fast should you level up? Like, what's too hard, what's not too hard? Is you usually get where first understanding those different mechanics, you first start off with what is an actual mechanically fair outcome for a game as you progress.
Mhm.
Then you have on top of that what feels like a fair leveling or mechanical outcome for what you're trying to create for an experience. And what I've come to find is that usually you kind of make it a little bit easier than what would actually normally be fair. And sometimes,
yeah.
Sometimes you don't discover this until playtesting, because you might be like, well, yeah, obviously, if the player needs to attack these enemies by this point, they should have this much of a level. But maybe you find out that, well, a lot of people skipped a bunch of enemies, and at this
Right.
point, maybe it's super hard. And so what happens is you get these players that was really easy in the beginning of the game, and later down the game, it feels like exponentially harder than what it was before, because they didn't go through those enemies, for example.
Right.
So
Wow,
what you
that's
have
funny.
to do is you have to kind of account for that.
What's funny about that is I remember playing through Chrono Trigger. I played through Chrono Trigger 3 times before I finally beat it, because I got to the end boss, and the end boss was just too strong. Even though I'd done like all of the side quests and all of the things, I still had not gotten enough to actually make it all the way through that end sequence. And so you had to grind a ton to really make it work. But the rest of the game didn't feel like you were behind. It just, when you got to that last sequence, you just got nailed.
I'm on a game like that right now, and I've actually had to stop because it's the last boss, and that's how it always goes. It's the last boss, so it's so hard. I just told myself, I know I'm gonna have to grind. And sometimes that can be deterrent, but I think you just need to use it in portions of the game that are epic, right? That need to be epic. Know that you need to be a certain level. You're not always just going to need to be the next level up to get to the next part. You may need to be 2 levels up, 3 levels up, 10 levels up into the next part. And that's progression. but
Right.
you just need to be intelligent about where you think those need to be if they are a bigger jump.
Right,
Because
right.
you don't want to sway the player too far away, because they may lose interest, right? They might be like,
Yeah.
this is too hard.
You were talking about making it slightly easier than fair. That actually makes me think about XCOM. That's something XCOM does. And a lot of those tactical kind of squad-based will give you a percentage chance of hit. But what they'll do is they will actually fudge the percentage that shows to help communicate the player. Basically give the player an opportunity to engage with something that's a lot more fun. So if you see an 80% chance to hit, that probably under the hood has a higher than 80% chance of actually hitting.
Yes.
Because the brain thinks 80%, I got this, no way it's gonna miss. And so it might miss 10% of the time or 5% of the time, but at 80% you're still, especially if it's like a 90 or a 95% chance, it's almost never going. I know that you would say, well, but 5% out of the time is technically not very often. Right, but an RNG, like a random number generator, that's going to roll that 5% sometime eventually.
Yeah,
and that's not going to feel good to the player.
There's this whole sorry about the angel personification you're just getting to with Colette,
Right.
and their godly father, but
yeah, my wife and I are just like, this guy's sus. He's totally sus.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of sus, and I guess it's too good to be true, but it's talking about the percentage and kind of rounding it off. Yes, there's a whole psychological portion of this, where as humans we kind of overcompensate and feel certain ratios and elements should be certain ways.
We're much more of an emotionally driven being than a rationally driven being.
Well, even then, our minds are built to kind of round off things in terms of information overload. Naturally, that's how we compute things. So sometimes they tend to be pretty inaccurate until we actually calculate the numbers ourselves. So
Yet another ridiculous tower.
Yes.
So many anime RPGs have ridiculous giant towers.
Exactly.
Sorry,
Talk
go
about
back.
Compensating.
All right then.
Yes.
Numbers. Numbers and values.
But it's just a natural unnatural thing that as humans we tend to generate, understand solutions a little bit in a broad sense, because if we were to actually try to calculate everything, we would have a hard time making decisions. We would have a hard time coming up with solutions, because sometimes those numbers really
is this
matter,
the whole thing where
you're
you come to a decision intuitively and then you reverse logic why you got to that decision? Is that this thing? Yeah. I've heard of that before. Most people make decisions based on their guts, and then they rationalize their reason post the decision.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, no
Lord
one
Remy.
does that.
I am absolutely guilty of that.
Yeah. I mean, most people are, and I think
I have a question.
we're trying to get into
I shouldn't say guilty of it.
think-
That's normal. I shouldn't feel guilty for
yeah,
making
yeah.
that, for doing that. That's normal.
I think that certain elements, I mean, this is a game, so it's fine to kind of round the numbers, right? I think there's certain portions in our lives where those might not be a good portion for us to round those numbers, but by it, natural human experience and solving problem solving areas, it may be more important, but we do round off numbers in games because we're trying to build an experience. We're not saying, well, if you don't beat Tales of Symphonia, you're going to be you dying in the game is you dying in life. That would be pretty important, right? You would want those numbers to be very specific. That'd be a crazy scenario. But if you...
Isn't that the plot of Sword Art Online, basically?
Something like that. Yeah. So those numbers, yeah, it's or games that are taken more seriously, where like if you and it's just a game as a game, right? But there's some games where like they're much harder, so maybe those calculations are more closer to
right,
the
right,
natural experience.
absolutely. Yeah, that was
like,
a point I wanted to
forget
bring up.
Yeah, go ahead.
That was a point I wanted to bring up too. Is that it really depends on the kind of game and the kind of experience you're trying to deliver. So there's a scale between very gamey to very simulation-y. And there are games that try to deliver very realistic, very simulation-like experiences. There's quite a few space sims that are out there that try to do that. And Kerbal Space Program,
or like,
right?
Splinter Cell and some of those Tom Clancy games are probably more realistic because they're trying to portray a real environment, a real experience.
Right.
And something like this is a bunch of animes with hands on their hips. And
right. And it depends on what kind of experience you're trying to deliver, and you need to understand and be able to boil down what is that core experience. And you'll notice anime silliness.
Yes.
You'll notice that there are games that there are games that don't do well for many reasons, but there are certain games that don't do well because they floundered on answering that core question of what kind of experience am I trying to deliver. And that's a really important piece, because if you get in your head what is the core experience of the game, and then every single thing that you think about doing, every new feature, every new narrative beat, if you run it through that filter of being like, does this advance the core experience, or is this taking away from the core experience, then you end up with a game that is far, far tighter. And so this game, I feel like it's very much delivering on that core RPG experience, but it cares about its narrative, it cares about its characters, it's trying to give you lots of tools to engage with the narrative, to engage the characters. It's making an assumption that the players who are playing this game want that kind of engagement. It even makes it perhaps to the wrong degree of not letting you skip cutscenes. But and then it has the core experience of the combat system, which is really fascinating. I, again, have not played a JRPG quite like this before. I'm assuming other Tales games are similar.
As far as I know, there's have to look at the list, but there's couple. I mean, they all kind of. I mean, there was a point in time where like. This was kind of a new experience, but a lot of the ones I've played in the past. Let me see. If I were to look at, because there's also some spin-off games.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of these. I mean, they're almost on par with Final Fantasy, right?
Yeah, yes. I mean, talking about the Tales of Tales. Yeah, there's Fantasia, Destiny, Eternia, Destiny 2, Tales of the Abyss, Vesperia was a popular one.
I saw that one pop up.
Yeah, Zelia, Abyss, Berseria. I'm probably saying that incorrectly. But a lot of these, especially since this was 2003, a lot of these other ones have probably carried over some of those similar mechanics. But I think the one I played was Vesperia, and it was similar to this.
You picked the wrong guy to mess with.
But I think it's trying to make it feel like you, the player, are making choices in the plot to own it as your own, right? Like you made the choice to go with Colette to the tower, or you decided to fight different enemies as you went along, and you did in some instance. There is some level of some choices, but at the end of the day, it's you playing this game a certain way and me playing this game a certain way will end up with I mean, I can't remember how it ends, but to my understanding, it's the same ending. It's the same plot.
Right.
Maybe
right.
you do a couple things here that's a little bit different.
But the core of the
for the most
experience would
part.
be the same. Yeah.
Exactly.
There was this guy on YouTube. I can't remember his name. He's quite prolific, but he does these like 10-second or less shorts that are just. He has this set of characters that are based on RPG tropes, and he'll have these like brief interactions between them. Rather funny. But I've been watching a lot of them recently, and so playing this through, have several of them run through my head. Yeah, so this is an interesting. I kind of want to spend a minute talking about what's going on here. So we've had what is effectively the opening scenario, right? So we came out of the school. There weren't any people around, nobody to interact with. We had to go on the little jaunt to fight a couple of people, some monsters, got the whole quest thingy. At this point, our main character is not going on the quest. Little do they know. But they're kind of building that up, which I think is interesting. It's not just an immediate delivery thing. But now all of a sudden we're back here. There's lots of things to talk. There's lots of people to talk to. All of the houses which were previously locked are now unlocked. You can go and you can look at them. There's not really tons there. There's a couple of interesting things to interact with, but there's not tons. But it's kind of like this is the breather phase before the next one, and I think that's an interesting question about what was I going to say? Pacing, right? So. Yes. In a game like this, where there's a possibility that you could, die and have to reload from your last save, the longer you've gone without saving, the more and more tense the player's going to feel. And to be fair, it has not had a lot of save points in here. I think we've seen 2. There was this one, and then there was the one that was back where we got the Sorcerer's Ring. And I think those are the only 2 save points I've seen so far.
Yeah.
And there's quite a bit of level between those 2 points. And so the further you get from a save point, the more and we're like, okay, how we're doing here? Like, can we save some time? And so now we've kind of come back here. There's a save point. We've saved. And then all of that tension that was building up has all gone. It's like all... So the player's now back down, and now there's no combats. There's a bunch of stuff to explore. There's people to talk to. There's some lore and some narrative to kind of suss out here. And then what was going to happen next is we're going to go travel home, which conveniently is through a forest full of monsters, and so you're going to go do a bunch of battle again. And once you get home, then it's, okay, back down again. Now there's some more conversations to happen. Their save point. And so there's a really good amount of pacing that I can tell so far, just between ratchet it up, combat, far away from save point. Now we got a save point. Now we're back down. Now we can relax. Now we're going to ratchet up again with the combat. That's a really good pacing structure so far. I really like that. And I think also true, what was interesting is that because they start with the opening, there's the people in the school you can talk to, which is a very limited space. You come out here and none of these people are here. All of the buildings are locked except for like 1 or 2 of them. So what that means is it channels the player into the adventure earlier, and you don't get bogged down with, oh my gosh, there's 200 people to talk to before I actually get to see any action or do anything, right? Yeah. So it's been really good. I've really enjoyed the pacing here. I think they have done a very, very fine job.
I mean, that's kind of for a lot of different reasons, like either because they're tailoring towards the different interests that a player might have, because people are going to come in with different interests, but also, it's, it allows you to like heal up, package up, all that good stuff in terms of like, if you're going out to fight monsters and you come back, you want the ability to like get your characters ready for the next thing. And it just becomes more interesting, right? There's a lot of mechanics that you can do in this town that you can't do when you're out in the real world, and vice versa, right? In the real world, when you're monsters, it's a very different experience. You can't just talk to villagers out of nowhere when you're fighting a monster, right? You can't just talk to the blacksmith and buy a sword while you're fighting a monster. So it kind of gives you that variety in a small categorized chunks.
Yeah, it's like a total context switch, right? So you're in the place where there's battle, and everything communicates that too, because you're out there. There's intense music. There's little black shadowy things running around, and you've got the combat, obviously. Here, the music's kind of chill. There's people walking around. There aren't any black shadowy things. There's no battles happening out of nowhere. You can feel free to explore freely without having to worry about things. Yeah, it's a total context switch, and I think it all goes together to communicate that shift really well. Well, we're coming up here on the last 10 minutes or so. I think actually we can probably this is a reasonable time to wrap it up. Before the next big adventure piece. But yeah, I'm really grateful for everybody sending this one at least my way and giving me an excuse to buy it, because I've really had a lot of fun with it so far. Like it's hitting all of those really good tropes of, you know, just remembering things from. I mean, I've played Chrono Trigger, love Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross, and Skies of Arcadia, big ones for me. I actually admit I have not played very many of the Final Fantasy. I've been maybe halfway through Final Fantasy X. I think that's the only one I've really played much of. One. Yeah, it's good. Well, no, there was another one. I had, it was Final Fantasy 12 or 13. I played at my brother-in-law's for a while. That was really good. I liked that one. That had an interesting combat thing, because it would be like the enemies were around you, and then there was like an arch that would point to between you and your enemy, and then you could like cast spells at them or fight them from a distance. But it was all, you didn't go into a battle arena. It was all done on the same layer, but then it was sort of timed out. It was kind of like it was like active time, because you had like a bar that filled up for your actions.
Yes. Yeah, and that's the cool thing is, like, again, all of these RPGs, why they're called RPGs in a sense, is that they kind of all have a similar core foundation in terms of the design mechanics. And why I think a lot of people like playing them, and why I think a lot of people like making them too, is you can layer stuff on them that either describes the type of feel of the game, or also, like this one, they had something called your tech skills versus your special skills. Or your strike skill, sorry. And that's not something that you need in an RPG. That's just something they're doing, and what it does is it gives them the ability to have, because as they level up, they'll get more skills, and they either fall in the tech or the strike ability portions. And depending on the player, Lloyd being like a good fighter, and Genus being like a good running, kind of almost attack from afar support player, they will benefit depending on what skills you're using in those categories, and that's kind of how that works.
Right.
So that describes their character. It's not that you need it, but it's nice because it helps build the character of those players that you're playing with. And that's what makes that kind of fun. And that could be applied to the inventory system, that can be applied to the different mechanics of spells, that can be applied to like a new system like cooking. Entirely a new system in here, just as a category that you can go to. It just kind of makes it fun. It makes it unique. And that's what's kind of neat. On top of a unique story, right? Like that's what's kind of interesting, is adding in those different abilities. So I added in, just as a side note, I added in a YouTube video I remember back in the day from The Escapist. They did a bunch of unskippable series, and they were all really just RPGs, and it's pretty funny. If you get a chance to take a look at that, it's pretty hilarious. But he kind of rips on Tales games, because they're all cookie cutted the same way in some instance, to a portion. Right?
Sure,
they did evolve over time.
Absolutely.
But the characters were very much pretty similar in terms of different tropes. So it's a fun one. If you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. They do kind of what we just did, just a little snippet of it, and just kind of have fun with some of the mechanics and the characters. So definitely check that out. And yeah, this is pretty neat to see. This
has been a ton of fun. I've really enjoyed this. When I'm always like, oh, but these. I feel like other people feel like this too, but I'm like, oh, these old great games, they're like my favorites, and like we should play those ones. But so many of these games are good, and so many people have that feeling about a lot of different games in the JRPG world, and so this was really enjoyable for me, getting to share this one, which other people obviously felt very passionate about with our community, and it was really neat getting to play with it. And I'm planning on finishing it. Like, this would be a fun one to do. I haven't done a long JRPG for a while, but yeah, this is really good. Go ahead.
And I know it's kind of funny because, in some instance, Caleb and I are very familiar with this genre. A lot of you are too. I feel like we're kind of hyping up because this is just a taste. Again, this is like 1 hour out of like what, 80
or so.
But I will say that I remember playing this game, like, it seems really plain for the most part in the beginning, and it's kind of meant to be like that for us to layer on. But I remember, like, you start to unveil, like, concepts of that big tower church, right? The role that Colette plays as the chosen one, what her role is, and how that evolves, and just kind of this underlurking, like, darkness coming into the world. It sounds really cheesy, and it is, to a point. But there are some unique things that I think without, we kind of layer these on with very plain character tropes. But then they layer on top of them, more information about where they are, how they kind of do twists and turns in the plot. It really starts to feel pretty interesting. Normally, like what you would do if you read a graphic novel or watched a movie or whatnot, it does become pretty fascinating as you start to layer on top of them.
Well,
So
I think that's
feel
one
like
of the
I'm hyping
things.
it up, but
Right. Well, I think that's one of the
fun.
things too about when you use, and this is really like universal for all narrative. When you use tropes, when you use stereotypes, the reason that those exist, and this goes back to the how our brains work thing. The reason those exist is because it gives a category for our brains to know and understand something quickly. And so when you're using tropes, when you're using stereotypes, you're allowing your players to get into your world quickly to understand who these characters are at a basic level. But then what really good narrative does, what rich narrative does, is it can use those stereotypes and then begin to layer, to twist, to change, to subvert your expectations on those, and to construct a really deep emotional bond between your reader and between your characters. And so then, it's sort of the classic thing of like, you have the show that you're showing somebody for the very first time. You're like, oh, this character's so good. And you're watching it. And that first season, that character was just annoying and you hated him. And everybody hates the character in the first season. But by season 5, they have just had these moments of character growth and development. And you're like, oh, but they're so good. And then you were showing your friend who's never seen it before. And they're just like, this character's stupid. Why do you like this character so much? I don't even want to watch this anymore. Like, no, but really... It's all coming from that.
The character progression, or anime progression. That's really what you described there. And I think that, when you were talking about what constitute, good narrative, I think what I've seen in terms of modern narratives, because and this could fall into a whole nother discussion, but like I feel like we've kind of fallen into some of these stereotypes that even if they evolve a little bit, I think that modern narratives are able to identify the culture at the time and be able to even evolve them further by saying, okay, so this character is like this. We can identify that character in real world things. Let's unveil what that means, right? I've seen a lot of new games that kind of invite like a Midwestern or a Middle East culture, or even like what is a true Eastern culture like experience, right? And I think that you kind of start with something that you're familiar with, and then unveiling those other layers of what either progresses those different tropes into like, hey, actually, this character is just like this, right? And that could be as easy as what I've seen a lot of nowadays, both in film and in games, and books materials is just making the main character a female. I think that's a great way to kind of tell that story and to unveil those things and those concepts. Not only to like normalize it and make it feel like, okay, these are things that are just, true. Like these are things that anybody can do. But also I feel like there are ways to like just kind of showcase like what are those different parameters? How do they fit? Because it's to me important to see those things because they open up the world to us in terms of what's really out there.
Right. And that,
right?
yeah, I was going to key off of that in terms of like, well, why diversity? So there can sometimes be a sense of diversity for diversity's sake, right? That you can fall into that trap where you're just like, we're just going to check off this diversity box so that the diversity box is checked off. But as storytellers, the reason that we want diversity is because different people and the variety of ways that people can be different bring different ways of telling stories together. And not just like the characters themselves being diverse, but also the people who write the stories need to be diverse because there are so many different kinds of stories. A story written by, this person versus that person who come from very different cultures or backgrounds or different gender or whatever the thing that makes them diverse is. When you allow yourself to hear stories from different people from different cultures, it enriches you. It enriches your experience. And so we want diversity because diversity is beautiful and rich and interesting, and there are so many different kinds of stories to be told. And so, yeah, I think that's an awesome reason for having diversity. And like, if we look at the typical JRPG, a lot of them are pulling on very similar narrative threads. So then it could beg the question, okay, well, JRPG are coming. I mean, it's got Japan in like JRPG as one of the letters.
Right.
But those tropes are so well established that many games that are JRPGs of the JRPG tradition are made not in Japan. But what does it look like if we took those same tropes, those same interesting ideas, and somebody from a different culture came at it, like somebody from Nigeria or somebody from Brazil or somebody anywhere. Like if somebody came at that with a totally different cultural, artistic storytelling perspective and brought their own cultural flavor to the JRPG, I mean, what could happen? I think there are actually some examples of different cultural representations of the JRPG style. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure that there are a couple of notable examples.
And I'm trying to find one that I played recently that was of a like a kind of like Indian culture, like different types of gods and deities and whatnot. I thought that was really fascinating. And the character was the main character was primarily a female. And I was like, this is kind of, I mean, to me anyways, it was kind of a breath of fresh air in some instance because it like, I didn't know what to expect. And sometimes you kind of feel that out, right? Like sometimes there's games that you may want to know what to expect. But it was kind of neat because it was still playing on some of the mechanics that I'm familiar with RPGs, but just changing it. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing a lot of nowadays is that players are kind of demanding more. They want more complexity, right? If you're going to spend 80 hours on a game, you may want to just see something that's a little bit different, right? Like that you haven't seen in a while. Like you've played the traditional, like, anime, like spin the wheel. Here's the 50 different, characters and whatnot over and over and over again. So it's, I don't know, like I said, feel like it's kind of a little bit of fresh, breath of fresh air to kind of see some of these new ones. Yeah, I know, it's that little tongue twister.
Totally. I do want to give a shout out to Tina, who's watching. She's a producer at Digimancy where I work. So hi, Tina.
Oh, cool.
All right, well, I think we're at time, so we should wrap up. But wow, fun diversity conversation right there at the very end. Just got to pull that out. That was great. Super cool. Thank you, everyone, for being a part of COGG, for all of your contributions. Obviously, we only exist because of all of you. You are the inspiration for us to put on these different events. You are the reason that COGG exists, is for all of you to come together and work as one. But we're super excited for all of the work you're doing. Please, do come by, share what you're working on. We want to see it. We want to support you. If you launch a game, we want to celebrate with you. There are actually a couple of games that have been launched recently.
Quite a few.
So I think we might be overdue for doing a little bit of a let's play on some of the games that our community has launched. So I think we will be looking into doing that very soon, maybe next month. So thank you.
That goes to say that if you want to be a part of these, we mention this every time, but Caleb and I, we help to run COG. We're more than happy to do these, but if you're interested, we always do a warm welcome if you want to play these. I mean, if you kind of want to do what I'm doing, I'm just talking, seeing what my perspective of these are. So yeah, if you want to be part of these live streams, we do record these and put them up for people to see, but basically just breaking down the games, just having fun and talking about them. We'd love for you to be part of the streams. We love you to be involved. So if you're interested, let us know. We do post stuff on Discord. So if you're ever interested in those, experiences and opportunities, we'd love to have you. Just to kind of add to that, we do have a lot of open public events. To everybody is interested in our different events. We've got one coming up next Saturday for our traditional game dev meetup. So Saturday, May 30th from 1 to 4 p.m. We'll be working with you guys to kind of set up where's COG going at, just do some announcements. As well as if you got some folks coming in that want to do a presentation, kind of like this, but you guys presenting something, we'll have someone there next month as well. So if you're interested in presenting something that's like a 15 to 20 minute talk on anything game dev related, let us know. You can find us out on our meetup page. We are the Central Ohio Game Dev Group, or COG. If you go to the COGG.com, you'll see all our different social media links at the top right corner. You'll see our meetup events. You'll see our Facebook page. You'll see our Discord and our red join button. You can find all that information right there, and that's how you kind of get to learn about us a little bit more. So definitely check us out. We're here for all of you. And like I mentioned, next month is our game dev meetup, and we'll kind of get things up to date in terms of where we're going from month to month there. So definitely check us out on that event. So we have the reoccurring event, this one, which is the Let's Play series. Sundays is the third Sunday of the month from 2 to 4 p.m. Our game dev meetup, which is the last Saturday of the month, is 1 to 4 p.m. We do our presentations, and then afterwards we do kind of like a social meetup on Discord or otherwise. And then we also do on the second Friday of the month, from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. we do something called Prototype and Play, which is kind of an organic Discord channel chat. You kind of move from room to room and just talk to developers, talk to people making stuff that is game dev related.
We had a great
It's
showing.
also a good social event.
We had a great showing at our Prototype and Play this month. I'm nervous now. I'm going to get it wrong. It was the Shawnee State Senior.
Yes.
The Shawnee State Seniors doing their game development project as their capstone for the time.
It was Polterheist.
Polterheist.
Instead of Poltergeist, Polterheist.
And so it was so much fun seeing what that team had been able to accomplish. Really, really cool. We had a great showing of people coming out to see them and support them. And that's what we're here for, right? That's what we're all about, is supporting people in the projects that they were doing. And I know that several people within that team have already kind of capstoned that, and then they're starting to work on some new projects and new ideas. So there's lots of churn. There's lots of stuff going on at COGG. People are making games, and it's really cool. So super glad to be a part of it all. I think we're going to wrap it up here. But thank you so much. It has been, again, another blast. I love doing these Let's Plays, talking about the deep dive design. We'll catch you next time.
Yep. See you guys next. Hey, everybody, have a great weekend. We'll catch you guys at another COG event. So
cheers.
Thanks, everybody.